Greetings! It's I, Tantus Dracovin, your Lord Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. If you are joining me, of course, live on Twitch, and if you're joining me on YouTube, hey YouTube! I hope you're enjoying the videos. I stream them live, record them up for you, do a little bit of editing here and there, not too anything major, and I hope you always like to learn from these deep lore videos, on both sides. And so, I'll give my shout-out to support on either side. Hey, Twitch could always use a follow. That's always a good support. Makes you know when I'm going live. Same with YouTube. Liking, subscribing, ringing the bell. And, my comment for both sides today is, have you played our topic for today, a Dhampir character? Dhampir. I never know how to pronounce this one. I'm going to go for Dhampir. It sounds more vampire-y. But I think also Dhampir might be appropriate. It's one of those ones that's a very weird one to figure out how it's pronounced. And, I could probably look it up, but it's probably one that might be appropriate. But we'll dive in today. Yeah, both are correct. Dhampir, yeah. We'll dive in today, learn about them, their ancestry. They're a lot deeper than you would think when it relates to Golarion, but they are fairly simple, so this won't be a too long video today. And as usual, I kind of tell you where I tend to start with my research. I start with the Pathfinder wiki sites, because the Pathfinder wiki is a very good site to start out with. And I dive into a number of books to, check some information. There is at least one of these I'm going to mention that I did not reference because it's a novel, but it does have a depiction of a Golarion Dhampir in Golarion society, so I might recommend it if you want to learn more about it in the societal thing. I'll explain as we get to it, but I will tell you the other book sources that I can, if you want to look in deeper, other than the wiki site, these are the ones that you would want to check out. Of course, the Advanced Race Guide is what introduced us to playing a Dhampir in Pathfinder 1st Edition. I would recommend, between that and this second book here, Blood of the Night, those two basically gave us most of our information on playing them. So if either of these you want to use in a 1st edition game, I'd recommend them. There are a lot of the mechanics related to them are here with some of the stuff I'm going to talk about. Of course, in the Lost Omens Ancestry Guide for 2nd edition, if you look on playing a Dhampir in 2nd edition, here it is. And the novel I mentioned is Bloodbound here. It's one of the Pathfinder Tales novels. And it stars our character here, who goes by, I have her name, Larsa, who is a Dhampir investigator as part of the storyline in the novel. So if you want to read up on it, there is an actual book that has a Dhampir as target. And we'll put her up here as we talk about it, as I also get invaded by a kitten. Hey, kitten interruptions are a constant thing to use. They're cute and here in the household, so we're going to interrupt the videos. Maybe have a guest spot. Maybe Foggy hangs around and we'll have her pop up on the end here. Let's talk about Dhampirs as what they are, because that's an important thing. They are this cursed mortal progeny of vampires. They are not undead, they are not immortal, but they are children of vampires. There are some other terms for them. Half vampire is something they're oftentimes referred to, or there is a bit more cruel of a slur, half dead, which can occur. Most Dhampirs are tall, slender. They have this physical grace, this unearthly beauty that is passed down from their vampiric sire, their parent. Eye color, skin hue, and hair color resemble that of their mothers, because again, this is a situation where it's a mother and a father, and the father is the vampire, for it to actually work, at least in most cases. They have this ghostly pallor, which can be very unnerving. They look kind of dead. They move very, unworldly. They have a piercing gaze. They all have elongated incisors, which is passed down from their vampiric progenitors. And they are still mortals, though. Their aging is slowed down, and they age at a rate comparable to that of elves. So that means if you were going to see a Dhampir to its correct age, it would live about as long as an elf. Now, because of their kind of status as beings in between two worlds, very much so, and their kind of supernatural abilities that are kind of natural in their blood, many of them do turn towards adventure. A vast majority of them do. Magic-using ones will often use undead bloodline sorcerers, or wizards in the necromancy school, occasionally oracles or witches. All of them can have this connection to their own supernatural side of things. Some of them that are a little bit more self-sufficient will go into things like rogues or swashbucklers. And there are those that seek to destroy undead and turn against them. I'll talk about that in a second here, but they would choose things like champions and rangers. So, let's talk about their origins a little bit, because the actual origins of the original Dhampir is kind of a point of debate. Though there are a certain number of ways that they can come into existence nowadays, the most original version of it's believed to be a relationship between a human woman and a male vampire. There's also those that are said to be born from women who are bitten while they are pregnant by a vampire. Others believe there's a unique race of humans who suffer from an unholy affliction of some sort. Maybe it's some kind of like, almost kind of curse. Whatever this truth might be, regardless, the Dhampires actually have a hard time reproducing themselves. And when they do, their progeny are always human. So the curse of vampire only lasts for one generation, when they are rarely born. But those humans also that they give birth to oftentimes manifest sorceress abilities. So it's a kind of an interesting thing that the supernatural power that is within their blood still manifests a second generation down from the actual vampire, but it does in a much different way from what it did to the Dhampir themselves. Many are often rejected or mistrusted for their actual lineage. So they're rarely accepted into normal society, especially when their lineage is understood. Situations where they don't know about their lineage or something like that are probably a little bit better situation, but again, that becomes down to who raises them too, because many, if not most, Dhampirs grow up as orphans. Because it's not impossible, but it is rare that a mother will survive the birthing of a young Dhampir. So, that's an important thing to think about. The majority of Dhampirs out there, mothers died during their birth. So if you're lucky to have your mother there, maybe you have a better situation than most. You're in a better station than your average Dhampir. But the vast majority of them will have difficult time with actual relationships because they are orphans, and they're just a little bit inhuman. Even in spite of having this kind of charm and grace to them that is gifted to them by their vampiric progenitor. Many Dhampirs fill the pool of what could be best called as evil, the corruption of their vampiric forefather. And at very least, even if they don't dive into that kind of darkness that accompanies the blood of a vampire, many of them fall into moral ambiguity. And there are a lot of them that will view those around them as tools or pawns. Again, each situation can be different from individuals, but as a generalization, because most of them fall into situations where this will kind of end up this way, it allows those darker urges to come out and those darker things to happen. Now, there are those that reject this wholeheartedly, and here's where many great Dhampir heroes can kind of come about, or adventurers, I should say. Because when they are faced with this darkness and these emotions that are deep within their soul, they instead turn against them, vowing to destroy undead horrors, and especially those responsible for their conception. Basically, I'm going to kill my father, my vampire progenitor, and all those related to them because of the curse they put upon the world about my existence. And that's why, again, you see those become champions and rangers very often. And, but again, to each their own very many times with the Dhampires. it is a very individualistic thing. We can only talk about the generals to the general situations to the group. So, your average vampire encountered in the Inner Sea region is related to the common vampire. They're known as the Moroi, which I will talk about the Moroi-born vampires in a second here. This is not the Moroi-born vampire here, or Dhampir. But there are other vampiric species around the world, and other varieties of Dhampirs. This here is a Jian Shi born that I'm showing off here, or a Rushi. They are the indirect offspring of the terrifying Jian Shi vampires, and are most commonly found in the Tianzi continent. They tend to be mechanically gifted, and avoid physical contact with other beings. So, if you don't know about the Jian Shi, they feed on the chi of living creatures by inhaling their breath. They're also known as hopping vampires. As a little bit of background information on those. Of course, then, there are the Moroi-born vampires. These are your common ones. These are the Moroi vampires. They're the ones you encounter most oftentimes as a vampiric race in the Inner Sea region, and these are the direct progeny of these. These are your common vampires. When you speak of vampires, you speak of Moroi. These are, oh hey, it's a vampire, necromancer. You're fighting as a villain in this arc. It's probably a Moroi vampire. They are the most often one, and they are, like all vampires, directly descended from the Strigoi, the ancient vampiric race, which entered the material plane from the Shadow Plane in the ancient past. Unknown if those still exist today, but there really are some stats for them. Just going to mention that, if you're interested in that one. They are enough of a rarity. Then we have this gentleman here, who, and that's Moroi-born, or Sevtocher, is what they are. Now this is a Nosferatu-born, or Ancient-born. These are humans born, these are vampires born of humans and desiccated Nosferatu. They inherit their parents' wasting condition. They often have a deep hatred of humanity. They're found more commonly in Ustalov. If you are unaware of the Nosferatu vampire, they're a primitive form of vampire. They are granted continued existence by their curse, but suffer the ravages of time. So that is one of the things about them. And so the Ancient-born suffer from that too. And the last one to talk about is, of course, the Vetala-born, or I'm going to butcher this one, Ajibakana. These are the vampires of Vudra. Of course, Vudra being a peninsula that's a large one in Kazmarin, a large section of the Kazmarinian continent. They're dexterous, fond of scholarly pursuits. If I'm remembering correctly, because I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, Avona in the Crimson Queen, my live play Pathfinder position, is a Volatile-born Dhampir, but they don't know that. But that's just a little bit of information. So they are a vampire from the subcontinent of Vudra. They feed on the creative consciousness or psyche of others, and are drawn to those that endow a greater force of will, creativity, or desire for greatness. They're kind of psychic vampires. So that's that. But that is, of course, the vampires. As I said, there is a bit of information here about them, but there isn't a huge amount of information on them, because they are a relatively simple ancestor. It's not to say that there couldn't be other unique forms of them. The Strigoi are something that is thought to be extinct, because they've now become 4 different ones. But what if one existed and could create a Dhampir? That would be something entirely different. You could have a storyline based on that. Maybe I would say that's probably less a character, but maybe an NPC, probably a villain, maybe an important NPC that calls upon your adventure characters to assist them in some way. To live up to some kind of great thing in there. So, like, it would be very story point, but that might be something cool to kind of put together an event. Just because, again, they are thought to be extinct. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Who knows? But the thing is, the Dhampir are an unfortunate group because they have this touch of the vampire in them from regardless of how their birth happened. However origin you talk about comes about. Regardless, it's almost like a curse upon them. Because that curse draws upon some of that darkness of the undead, that viewing of other humanoids almost as, in the case of the Dhampir, it's more that they are just tools or things to be used. It's the same kind of attitude a true-blooded vampire would take. That's why it shows up there. Because there's this, like, disconnection a lot of times between their basically mortal side and their living side. And again, they aren't necessarily human. Human being, of course, the most common. So human is probably the one you're going to see the most. But it is another one of those ones that theoretically you could be a Dhampir or something other than a human. Theoretically. So that's not necessarily a different kind of thing. And I'm sure in the newer books they talk a little bit more about that, because they are a little bit better on those kind of connections and things like that. So, but it is definitely interesting to think about the curse that's upon these poor beings. Many of them just suffer greatly because of it. Because of their blood. And maybe even more so than many of the other, I could call them almost cursed ancestors. Those that have been plagued by a blood which drives them in a way. Whether for good or for bad. Whether for the right and power of society or against it. They are still cursed by this blood, driven by it. Vampire. This inhuman, undead nature that goes slightly through their veins means that more so than any of those, they are, well, less alive, less humanoid, just to a little degree. Being part undead, that cruel term, half dead. It's not wrong in a way, unfortunately. Not at all. It is a cruelty to refer to them that. Because they are still alive. But it's also part of their nature that many of them don't deny. Can't deny. But how they embrace it, that's up to the individual. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning about the Dhampir today. They're an interesting group to say the least. And I don't think I've played one before, but I've had a number of people in my games, including, of course, the current one I mentioned, play them before, and they always add an interesting level, something a little interesting to the story, with their backstory in the games. So again, that's my question. So if you didn't answer earlier, which doesn't seem like that, if you didn't say it earlier, remember, my question of the day is, have you played a Dhampir character? Or been in a game with them? Remember, again, all those ways to support both me on Twitch and YouTube. If you're already on one of them, make sure to check out the other one. If you want to check out my social medias, I have a Discord and a Twitter.com linked below. If you want to check me out live when these go up, that's on Twitch. Tabletop stuff is on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoon, usually between 1 and 2 I get started. Saturdays around 11. The Tuesdays and Thursdays are a little bit more flexible in schedule, depending on life stuff. These Saturdays are a little bit more exact on schedule, so just keep that in mind. And if you want to look on this afterwards and see it up on YouTube, it's usually 1 or 2 days afterwards when I do these that they end up on YouTube. So you're not missing stuff technically, but I'd always like to show you live. I do other tabletop-related stuff, which again goes both on live on Twitch and up on YouTube later on. My live show, Cribs and Queen, I mentioned, Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Of course, Discussing Tabletop Saturdays at 6 p.m. My tabletop discussion show where me and my friends talk about news of the week and deeper discussion topics. And I do some gaming streams on Twitch if you ever want to check those out, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, in the mornings. So, I've given my shout-outs. I've given you my information. I hope you've learned a thing or two. And maybe you just want to play a Dhampir character for the complexity of the character. And, trying to be someone that lives beyond a cursed and cruel fate. But until the next time we talk about another ancestry, something more about Pathfinder Golarion, or another role-playing game, I bid all of you out there a wonderful and deep farewell.